What would you do if your car breaks all the records? But right after the FIA starts looking at it with a magnifying glass. That is exactly what is happening with Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton. After setting the best time in the Barcelona tests, the SF26 has been singled out for allegedly crossing the line between legal and illegal. But is there really a formal investigation? Is Ferrari cheating? Or has it simply surpassed its rivals with technical genius that others don't yet understand? El dato clave aquí es que el SF26 fue el segundo monoplaza con mayor kilometraje en toda la semana, acumulando más de 650 kilómetros sin reporter fallos significativos. That reliability, coupled with speed, is what really raised the tension in the paddock. Mercedes was the only team that lapped more, but failed to set a faster time. George Russell was only 97 thousandths behind, but without that spectacular lap to attract the same level of attention. And in Formula One, who sets the time matters as much as how they set it. And in this case, it was Lewis Hamilton with the prancing horse on his chest. The symbolism was brutal. The 7-time champion, in his second major appearance with Ferrari, was already at the top of the tables. For the Tifosi, it was a spiritual rebirth. For the competition, a reason to dig with a magnifying glass. De hecho, lo que elevó en más la sospecha fue el momento en el que se produjo ese registro. Al final de la jornada, cuando la pista estaba más engomada y los focos mediáticos estaban más atentos que nunca. The perception that it was a move calculated to impress was not long in coming. Several teams suspected that this was a deliberate attempt to mark psychological territory before the actual start of the season. The noise grew when rumors began to circulate on technical forums and social networks about a possible FIA investigation. Some media outlets even stated, without official sources, that the regulatory body was already evaluating the legality of the SF26 due to its explosive performance. The truth is that there is not and was not at that time a formal investigation by the FIA focused exclusively on that lap time. But what did happen was a phenomenon very characteristic of this sport. When a team surprises too soon, distrust becomes the dominant narrative. And that narrative spread like fire. From specialized accounts to accredited journalists began to theorize. Had Ferrari activated some prohibited engine map? Were they using an illegal aileron configuration? Was Hamilton simply too good to be believed? The media storm was not new for Ferrari, nor for Hamilton. But what was peculiar in this case was the unanimous echo of expert voices that suggested that something did not add up. And the most intriguing thing is that the real reason why the SF26 began to be noticed by the FIA was not that lap time, but a brilliant and almost invisible technical solution, which would later reveal its true potential. A desynchronized active aerodynamic system that would completely change the conversation. But before we get there, the important thing is this. Ferrari not only set the fastest time in the tests, it activated a mechanism that in Formula One is even more important than pure speed. The fear of rivals. And that fear, when it takes the form of suspicion, has the ability to alter regulations, open investigations, and redefine entire seasons. Modern Formula One is a battlefield where technical ingenuity is worth more than brute force. In an environment where all teams work with million-dollar resources and access to cutting-edge technology, competitive differences emerge at the smallest margins. And that is exactly where Ferrari has decided to attack in 2026. That the SF26, beyond its media return time in Barcelona, has generated real panic in the paddock due to an innovation that seems taken directly from a tactical warfare manual. Desynchronized active aerodynamics. It sounds complex, but the idea is as simple as it is dangerous for its rivals. And the most disconcerting thing of all is that, at least for now, it is perfectly legal. To understand this revolution, you have to go back to the heart of the 2026 technical regulations. In this new era, the FIA allows a certain degree of active aerodynamics. That is, the car's wings can be adjusted dynamically depending on the context of the track, closing for greater downforce in corners and opening for less resistance on straights. But the standard requires that this transition be synchronized between the front and rear wing. The intention is to keep the balance of the car stable at all times. Ferrari, without breaking a single word of the regulations, has created a brilliant solution. Designing actuators, that is, the mechanisms that move the ailerons with different reaction times. According to leaked technical analyses and discussions on specialized forums, the SF26 front wing deploys approximately 0.3 seconds before the rear wing during the transition between curve and straight line. This offset, although slight, has a dramatic impact on the car's behavior. What does Ferrari achieve with this? In essence, during that brief period of time in which only the front wing is deployed, the center of aerodynamic pressure of the car moves towards the rear. This phenomenon increases traction just at the most delicate moment, exiting a slow curve onto a straight line. Instead of wasting time waiting for both spoilers to react at the same time, the car dynamically rearms itself to accelerate sooner, with greater grip and less loss of momentum. The result: a gain of key tenths on limited traction circuits. What makes this solution a true masterstroke is that it is not a delay programmed by software, something that would be prohibited by the FIA. The delay is purely physical, a natural consequence of the mechanical properties of the actuators designed by Ferrari. The control software acts in unison as required by the standard, but the hardware responds at different times. Legal, cunning, devastating. These types of gaps in the regulations are what define entire eras in F1. Red Bull did it at the time with blown diffusers, Mercedes with its DAS system, and now Ferrari seems to have found its secret weapon for 2026. But as in all previous cases, the key is in the FIA's reaction time. Will they allow it? Will they veto it with a technical directive? Will they wait for other teams to copy the solution? Ultimately, this situation is not a simple case of what is allowed and what is not. It is the purest reflection of what Formula One is, a war of technical interpretation where winning is not only a matter of speed, but of knowing how to read between the lines. The new regulations, introduced as part of this season's big technical change, establish a geometric compression limit of 16:1. This figure represents an effort by the FIA to limit gross power gains and encourage more uniform thermal efficiency between manufacturers. But Ferrari and its allies claim that Mercedes and Red Bull have found a technical loophole. The regulations require compression to be measured with the engine cold, that is, at room temperature, something that the German and Austrian engineers would have masterfully taken advantage of. How does this supposed legal loophole work? The key is thermal expansion. By designing the combustion chambers and internal engine components with specific materials that change subtly with heat, Mercedes and Red Bull could achieve that. Once in full operation, when the engine is at very high temperatures, the combustion gap is effectively reduced, restoring a compression that approaches 18:1. That would imply a higher performance than the FIA intended to allow. This change, apparently minor in physical terms, would have enormous consequences on the track. The most conservative estimates speak of a gain of 15 horsepower. In Formula One numbers, that can translate to up to 3/10 of a second per lap at circuits like Suzuka or Albert Park. And 3/10 are literally the difference between fighting for podiums or being stuck in the middle of the pack. The most striking thing about the case is that the FIA until now has not issued a technical directive prohibiting this interpretation, nor has he publicly stated that this is a violation. What it has done is initiate a series of internal reviews, technical studies, and consultations with suppliers of sensors, materials and telemetry to determine whether what Mercedes and Red Bull are doing constitutes a violation of the spirit or the letter of the regulation. Ferrari, for its part, has adopted an unusually proactive profile in this dispute. Not only has he led the formal complaint, but he has promoted conversations among motorists to pressure the FIA to close this possible technical crack before it is consolidated as a structural advantage. Because in F1, what doesn't stop in time becomes the de facto norm. The irony is profound. While Ferrari is accused by some media of crossing the line with its active aerodynamics, in the field of engines it plays the role of defender of the regulations. The Scuderia is using the formal channels of the FIA to demand equal conditions in an area where, historically, it has been vulnerable to Mercedes. We must not forget that for much of the hybrid era that began in 2014, Ferrari was a victim of the absolute dominance of the German engine, and that its attempt to regain ground with its own solutions in 2019 ended with a confidential investigation that still sparks conspiracy theories today. The background of this new war is clear. The teams fear that if the FIA does not act quickly, the next few years will be defined by the preseason tests, with a technical hierarchy that is difficult to break. If Mercedes and Red Bull start the year with a structural advantage in power, not even the best aerodynamic innovations will be able to compensate for that gap. In that scenario, Ferrari, Honda, and Audi would be condemned to pursue for years an advantage born of regulatory ambiguity. The situation is at a critical point. According to various paddock sources, the FIA would be considering a new technical directive that redefines the way in which engine compression is measured and validated in real operating conditions. This could involve a partial rewriting of the engine technical regulations, or even the implementation of thermal sensors that guarantee consistency between theoretical and real values. But in the meantime, teams continue to develop, fine-tune, and exploit every millimeter of advantage they can find. The case of the SF26 and its desynchronized active aerodynamic system is the clearest example. Ferrari has not broken a single written rule. He has interpreted the regulations with an astuteness that is reminiscent of the great technical movements in the history of the category. But that interpretation, although legal in its form, puts the spirit of the rules in check. And that's where the controversy arises. Is she being clever, or is she manipulating a legal loophole that should never have existed? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.